Congrats to the Stars on winning the Clarence Campbell Trophy. In this week's episode, we update and/or finalize how the conference finals are going with guests from all four teams. Hit the music. Welcome to Jablam Sports Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Borjaranov, and the mic is always on. You can find me on Twitter at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on the three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with three hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, go to jablamsports.com, see all our podcasts, and even game notes for each episode. You'll get links to all the things we mentioned on this show, including guests. For our podcasts, click on podcasts, and then hockey on this show specifically right on our website. Jablam Sports Twitter poll. We had a poll on our Twitter account at Jablam Sports, and it was, which is a worse way to lose? Leafs leading 4-1, of course, against the Bruins, Game 7, a few years ago now, or the Vegas Golden Knights 3-0 lead, and then that major penalty kill that they had to face near the end of the game last season. Yep, and of course, where the votes are finished, 53-47, so tight, edge for Vegas. People thought Vegas was the tougher of the two to lose, and you know what? I'm on that side. I think it was very close, though, the poll. I'm kind of surprised, and remember, we do the Twitter poll almost every week, so make sure you follow us at Jablam Sports. And, of course, you can follow me at Russia98. But, yes, the way Vegas lost the game, this series this week, was a little tough, in my opinion, as well. But nowhere near. And, of course, which game it was, Game 5 versus Game 7s. And it's 2-goal difference leading, with 10 minutes left. A little bit of difference, but it still sucks. And, yes, I know it has, like they tweeted out, pain. It's not that bad, but it's bad, man. Still, if you're a sports fan, it sucks losing and having a big loss quickly too late in games, late in series. So that's a tough one to lose for them. This week, we'll get right into our interviews from each team. Enjoy. Now, let's talk some Lightning. We've got on the show Erlendsson. He covers the Lightning. You can get his website at Lightning.Insider.com. You can find him on Twitter at Eric_Erlendsson. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Peter. How are things, man?
Pretty good. And they're looking pretty good for Tampa. Eh?
Yeah, they've had a pretty good little run here in the postseason. You win your first round in 5 games. You win your second round in 5 games. And, of course, as we're talking here, there's the opportunity to win your third round in 5 games. So it's they've had a nice little run here. They're kind of on, I hate to use the term, I guess Ray Bork had it, right? The Mission 16W that they had a number of years ago with the Colorado Avalanche, but they just kind of have that sense about them after what happened to them last year. And I honestly think that them facing the Columbus Blue Jackets in the first round was probably the best thing that could happen to them, right? Like try and exercise those demons in a lot of ways. So they've just come together. They've been a much different team in terms of their mentality, their patience on the ice, typically a team that tends to maybe push the pace a little bit and maybe force plays as they've done in the past. But they have not done that in these playoffs for the most part, and they're getting rewarded for it.
Yeah, it looks like they are exercising the demons really well with Blue Jackets and even the Bruins in the playoffs, so that's great for them.
And potentially Barry Trotz, of course, who knocked them out in 2018 with the Capitals. So
yeah, for sure, exactly. Before we get into, of course, we're recording this the day before this podcast is out, the game tonight. Who on Tampa, other than obviously Braden Point, really do you feel that really stepped up during these three rounds so far.
Oh boy, there's a long list of candidates.
Mm.
I mean, I think Andrei Vasilevskiy is going very quietly undernoticed for the job that he has done because we do talk so much about Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov, and in a lot of ways Victor Hedman as well. But you look at the numbers that Andrei Vasilevskiy is putting up: a sub 2.0 goals against average, his save percentage has been hovering around 930 for almost the entire playoffs. I mean, he has really put together a solid run in net. But after that, if we're talking about guys that maybe don't stand out on a name basis, it's probably Yanni Gourde. You look at some of the plays that he has made. You go back to the series against Columbus, and that line with Barclay Goodrow and Blake Coleman were really good, particularly in Game 4, where they accounted for both the goals in that Game 4 victory against the Blue Jackets. And then you look at the play that he made on the tying goal in Game 4 for Tampa Bay. 15 seconds after the Islanders took the lead, he's behind his own blue line or behind his own goal line and flips a puck that Blake Coleman is able to chase down and corral, and it's such a huge response after that line just got scored upon, and just the feistiness that Yanni Gourde has shown, and he's been winning some faceoffs as well. He's been out there in the penalty kill. I mean, he's kind of that guy that he's been with this team now for a couple of years, and he's been a 20-goal scorer a couple of times, but in the 2 playoff runs that he's been involved in, he hasn't had a huge impact. He's having a huge impact in this playoffs.
Yeah, you reminded me. I picked him 2 years ago to do well, and I was a little frustrated. I was like, you're really good during the season, but you're pissing me off a little bit now. You can see, I think it was Game 2, that Coach Cooper really wants to win. When Kucherov scored that goal late in the game, wow, I don't know if I've seen a coach selly that hard during a goal.
Yeah, I think that game just meant so much to them too, right? And I remember writing about this on my website. With this, hockey is such a game about heart and emotion, right? The players put so much emotion into it. And you think of the circumstances the Lightning had in that game. They lose Alex Killorn 6 minutes into a 5-minute major and an ejection. Braden Point goes down in the second period. They only dressed 11 to start with. Now you're down to 9 forwards. And you had to kill off a 5-minute major, which they did. You had to kill off about a 40-second 5-on-3 in the third period of a tie game, and then you win the game with 8 seconds left. I mean, you want to talk about a celebration. And then, from Cooper and the players too, just the little group of, I think it was Yanni Gourde, Barclay Goodrow, and Kucherov all kind of jumped together, right at the red line or the blue line there. So, but yeah, there's no doubt this means a lot to him too, right? John Cooper's got, I don't want to say he's got a lot riding on this, but, there are a lot of eyes looking at him because of the success this team has had in the regular season since he's taken over. They had the one trip to the finals in 2015. 2016, they had a 3-2 series lead on Pittsburgh. Couldn't close it out, get to the Stanley Cup final. 2018, they had a 3-2 series lead against Washington after falling down 2-0 in the series. Couldn't close the job. The sweep last year. So there's a lot of eyes, and he's aware of that are judging what he's doing and how he's doing it. So I think there's a lot at stake for him as well.
Yeah. I don't know, in my mind, that enough people are talking about Andre Palat. He just seems like he's been a fantastic fit on that top line, and I guess they're just recouping what they've had in previous years, especially after when Killorn was out for that 1-game suspension.
Yeah, he's been a good fit with Point and Kucherov, especially in the absence of Steven Stamkos. It was Stamkos, Point, and Kucherov for a good portion of the season, not the whole season, because Palat did get some time there too as well. But he's just a guy who goes out and does his business. He just does his job, right? He's, as John Cooper says, he's always above pucks. And, you watch him along the walls. He very rarely loses wall battles for the puck. He's just so engaged in the way he plays. And he's been banged up the last couple of years. He's had he had a high ankle sprain. I think he had 2 high ankle sprains over the last couple of years that really limited him. He came in this year a little bit leaner, a little bit more, less weight that he was carrying with him, and he was healthy. He had a whole summer to be able to train. So it's paying off for him, and he's just a perfect complement. There's star players, and then there's really good complementary players. Andre Palat is a really good complementary player because he's a defensive. I mean, you don't hear too many wingers talked about in the Selke. He's a guy who could be in the Selke conversation if they gave more consideration to wingers. He's that good defensively. And then he just knows how to read off of players. I mean, the go-ahead goal he had in Game 4, really reading exactly what was going on in front of him and trailing the play, and then Kucherov to find him. He's just in sync with those guys too. So again, a quiet guy, doesn't say a whole lot, unheralded. He's not going to put up 20 goals, but he can come through in a clutch. He did it in 2015, and he's doing it again now.
I know many fans outside of Tampa Bay aren't really thrilled about Kucherov's two-hander after the empty net goal the Islanders scored in the previous Game 3. Some people might say he's dirty. Do you think he could be considered one of those dirty type players? We've seen what he did last year in the playoffs. And then, what happened with that instance. I don't know. Maybe it's just Islander fans getting a little loud.
Well, Islanders fans have shown that they're a little touchy. There's no doubt, as I found out during this little playoff run as well. But, he's got a little bit of that to him, a little sneakiness. But I would not in any way classify him as a dirty player.
Yeah.
Even the slash, like I heard somebody describe it as a two-hand baseball slash. I don't know what baseball league that person learned to play baseball in, but usually when you swing a bat, it's behind your shoulder, and then you swing through. It was a little chop at the ankle. It wasn't a two-handed backhand swing. It wasn't anything like that. And let's be honest, Nikita Kucherov took a butt end of a stick from Pageau earlier in the game. He took a bunch of splashes from Pageau earlier in the game. Matt Martin has been running him the entire series. That's just a little frustration from a player who's he's just trying to stand up for himself, right? Like he's just trying to send a message. All right, you're going to hack and whack at me. I'm going to have my opportunity. I'm going to take advantage of it. So I don't think it's dirty at all. It's a little frustration and it's a little payback.
Yeah, I in my mind, I kind of liked to see a little bit of emotion out of a leader on my team in a game that you're losing in the playoffs, and it shows that the games are really, really important to him and he wants to win. And I think I'd rather have that reaction than just a shrug and a skate towards my bench. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, it wasn't anything out of line, right? Like it wasn't. I mean, he didn't go Dale Hunter on him, right?
Yeah.
This is not Dale Hunter and Pierre Turgeon, as we saw a number of years ago. So, I guess in the modern day age, it's kind of looked at a little bit differently than certainly back in that day. But in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't really much of a slash at all.
For sure. Point missed the one game, Game 3, but it looked like he just continued where he left off. Another fantastic Game 4. How close is he to maybe 100%, or is he just playing with adrenaline right now?
Well, I think we can kind of take a couple things into account. First of all, he did miss a Game 3 when they already knew they were going to be without Alex Killorn, so that kind of tells you he is definitely dealing with something that is hindering him. And then we saw him leave in the third period after what was really a pretty innocuous hit. It wasn't really much, but it triggered something that he's obviously been dealing with. And then you hear John Cooper after the game say, "Yeah, we're trying to manage him, trying to watch his minutes." So that kind of gives you an idea of what he's dealing with. And the other thing is too, we didn't see him practice on Monday. We didn't see him participate from the videos that the league sent out. We didn't see him participate in the morning skate. So there's definitely something that he's dealing with. We don't know to what extent. We might not know to what extent, but they need him. They need him. They need him. The way he's been driving this team, the way he's been driving his line in particular, with his ability to generate the speed coming up through the middle of the ice and back defenses off. I mean, they really have to pay attention. And then you add a Kucherov, who's a threat as well. I mean, that really puts defenses back on their heels when Braden Point can come up the ice with speed. So they're going to need him if they want to finish off on the ultimate goal here.
Yeah, they will. They will for sure. Going into the game tonight, kind of what is their mindset versus Isles and Barry Trots, the way he can, sometimes out-coach the other coach?
Yeah, they're trying to keep a simplistic approach, and I mentioned that they won each of their first 2 rounds in 5 games, so they understand what they're up against. And both those games, I mean, Columbus really took it to them, particularly in the second period of Game 5. It took a third period comeback on Tampa Bay's Park to get that game to overtime and win it. And then against the Bruins as well, they took a lead late in the third period. Boston came back and tied it. It took a double overtime goal from Victor Hedman to win that game and then close out that series. So they understand what they're up against. And then, having been so close, the previous couple of times when they were up in the conference finals and couldn't close the deal, there's still a lot of players that have been around from those teams. So I guess, the Islanders were trying to mix and match things up to kind of give a different look. We'll see how all that plays out. But, the Lightning have the right mindset. They have the right frame of mind going into an elimination game, but there's always an opponent that you got to deal with.
Yep, for sure. Before we leave, one little thing. I know you might not be able to talk too much towards this, but I think a lot of people saw the video of like Stamkos in practice, and without like an injury or red jersey, is it still possible he can maybe come in these playoffs if they reach the finals? Maybe there.
I mean, you can't rule it out. If you see him skating, you see him participating, and my understanding was an optional practice on Monday, and sometimes just based on the way the Lightning run their practices, usually an optional. A guy, if he's injured, tends not to necessarily wear a red. So I don't know how much we can read into that, but.
Yeah.
The fact that they showed video of it, like, I find it interesting because we were told before the conference finals, no more questions, he's out, right? Let's shut it down. And then out of the blue, oh, by the way, yes, he is back on the ice. And oh, look, we have video of it as well. So the timing of it is a little strange. Look, nothing would surprise me. He's been obviously out since just after the team got to Toronto at the end of July. Haven't seen or heard from him since that week that they got there. I mean, I think it's unlikely, but I'm not going to rule it out, because if they are able to move on from the Islanders and actually advance to the Stanley Cup final, knowing how much it means to him and how close that they've been a couple of times and how big of a part of the franchise, the captain, the longest tenured player, he's been the face of the franchise for more than a decade now, it would mean a ton to him to have the opportunity to play. So if there's any possible way he could get in the lineup, I don't think we could count it out.
Yeah, I think if they go pretty far, he's going to want at least a couple of minutes on that ice before they can possibly...
Well, they could use him on the power play too, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Even if you limit his minutes and you kind of keep it low, he's still a guy who can shoot the puck over there. And, their power play numbers look a little skewed because they've had a couple of multi-power play goal games, but they could use his presence over there just for the power play alone.
For sure. Again, you can find him on Twitter at Eric_Erlendsson. Thanks for coming on the show, Eric.
Thanks, Peter. Good to talk again, man.
Let's talk some Isles. Now we have back on the show Christian Arnold. He's the editor-in-chief at NYI Hockey Now, and he's co-host at Hockey Night New York. You can find him on Twitter at C_Arnold01. Christian, welcome back to the show.
Appreciate you having me back on.
All right. So, of course, this episode's out Wednesday, but we're recording this before the game, Tuesday night. Big game. They're down 3-1. What changes do you see Trots doing to the lineup for tonight?
Yeah, it'll be interesting for Barry Trots to see how he maneuvers everything. Ross Johnson obviously got in the last game, and it'll be interesting to see if he's back in the lineup. I believe from the video that we saw on the NHL website, or the media website, I should say, that Michael Dal Cole and Johnny Boychuk didn't practice today. The Islanders really haven't been skating a lot, so that could be a sign that one or both of those guys, they take warm-ups so they get back into the lineup. It's kind of do or die at this point. And Barry Trotz is just going to do mix and match things. He's managed to find a way throughout this run in the playoffs for the Islanders to put together a pretty good lineup in a very unique fashion sometimes, going against the grain at times. Obviously, Thomas Greiss starting in Game 7 against the Philadelphia Flyers is a great example of that, right? Because you would have expected Varlamov to be back in net. He's the guy that got you there, et cetera, and you give it to Greiss for, a pretty important start, and he goes out and he plays very, very well in net, and the Islanders give him one of the best defensive performances. So it'll be very interesting to see how this roster looks come game time tonight, and obviously people will know how it worked out in the end by the time this is up.
Who would be your go-to then between the pipes? I know that Greiss has better save percentage numbers with like a 930, but Varlamov has gotten most of the wins.
Yeah, Thomas Greiss. I mean, it helps too when you really only make 2-3 appearances in the playoffs. So certainly your number is going to be a little different compared to a guy who's, like you said, got the majority of the starts. Again, if it's me, I go back to Semyon Varlamov. I think he's played really good hockey for the Islanders, and kind of to take what Trotz said earlier today. And that's, you don't want to shake things up too much and not show confidence in the guys that got you there. And Semyon Varlamov, was one of the key reasons why the New York Islanders are in the Eastern Conference Final. And I would say he's earned the opportunity to kind of sink or swim with this team here in this crucial situation.
What is their mindset going into this big game 7?
Yeah, I mean, they seem pretty calm and collected. The Islanders traditionally have always been, at least through this playoffs anyway, they've been, very casual and very focused on the task in hand. There's not a lot of panic. I think the only time you really saw panic and frustration in the Islanders really was that first game in this series, game 1 against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where the Islanders uncharacteristically looked just off. I think the best example of that is Matt Barzal slamming his stick into the glass a couple times during the third period of that game when the Islanders were pretty far out of it. So I think that's the only time I've ever seen some sort of frustration or panic. Other than that, the Islanders have looked cool as a cucumber, and I think that's a credit to the leadership in the group in the room and obviously the coaching staff and Barry Trotz, who have managed to kind of exude this confidence in the team and push the right buttons, but it's never felt like they've been out of it. And really, when you look back at these games and look back at the series, the outcome is dependent on the fact that the Islanders didn't capitalize on certain mistakes that they made in some of these previous games, and the Tampa Bay Lightning certainly did. I think the 27-second span there in Game 4 really just changed the course of everything, where the Islanders had the momentum. It's a great example of, that's the Islanders were trying to do what they were trying to do, and they did it. The problem was after that, they just fell apart, but they didn't play smart hockey. Blake Coleman gets behind the defense for that breakaway goal. And then the Tampa Bay top line, which has been phenomenal this entire series, did what they do best. And talk about crisp passing and great foresight to find guys open for a scoring chance there. They did that right there. And 27 seconds after the Islanders had a lead, it was gone.
Yeah, it sure was. You were talking about them not being really frustrated, but I do see a little bit maybe more emotion from some of the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially included some Islanders fans aren't too thrilled about with Kucherov in the previous game, with the two-hander to Pajot, with the empty net goal, the feistiness, all throughout that game as well. I think some Islander fans thought it was maybe even suspension worthy. What did you think?
You know what? Was it necessary? It wasn't. It was, he was frustrated. I think the Lightning were frustrated in that instance. And, that's playoff hockey right there. I said it the other day on the podcast that I co-host, that, you got to give JG Pajot credit for not taking the bait after the game and then kind of fanning the flames a little bit, and kind of just stayed pretty, out of the fray. But certainly, this is not the series I would have expected, this kind of nastiness and this kind of animosity between the two teams. When you look at the teams that the Islanders have played, Philadelphia, Washington, even Florida a little bit. These are teams that the Islanders really have history with, recent history with, of course. You're playing two teams that are in your division. So those are the games you expect to be nasty and have like that extra oomph to it, especially Washington. Talking about that series, the guys really talked about how back in 2015, that was probably one of the most intense series they've played in. That was nothing compared to the first 4 games of the Tampa Bay New York Islanders series, because it really just had that nastiness. And you go back to Game 2, the hit on Brock Nelson by Killorn really set the tone there. And a lot of Islander fans didn't like it. It was absolutely, I think it was the right call to suspend him. I don't necessarily know if there was an intent to injure him. I would say there wasn't. It was just him trying to finish his hit, and it was just poorly timed and caught him at a bad spot. But then you add to the fact that Brock Nelson leaves. He comes back in the game later, and then you have Barclay Goodrow cross-checking him in the back of the head. That really set the tone there for the nastiness and the increase in physical play, because that sets the tone then for Game 3, where the Islanders come out a much more physical team. And of course, once the game is going in their favor a little bit, that's when you start to see them remember, Goodrow, Matt Martin and Goodrow go at it. They're not taking the extra whacks, Pajot sticking up for himself there at the end of the game. So it's been fascinating to see this series be the one that really took on that kind of tone, but it's been a lot of fun. And I think that's really the epitome of playoff hockey, and the weird sense, the weird situation we have here with no fans, and these games in the bubble. Some of the series haven't had that. This really feels like a deep playoff series between two teams who just don't like each other anymore.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting with all the history with those other teams. I do think mentally and with everything going on, some teams and some players maybe specifically, especially with some teams that have already won the cup recently with the Capitals and with the Blues, and they're just not mentally there, or they're dealing with something, or we have like Kucherov and he's got his family back home, and you're not mentally in the game. Whereas some teams like Tampa, they've got a bit of a chip on their shoulder too from all those years of not going all the way. And even we even saw Kucherov last year. He's really you can see he really wants it though. He wants it, and that's what's made this series in my mind still entertaining.
Oh yeah, and I think to add to that too, you look back, it almost has that feeling of the Capitals. The Capitals were in the same spot. The Capitals were a team that great regular season team. They get to the postseason. They make a little bit of a run there, and things fall apart. I think Tampa Bay, it's the same situation. Like you're saying, they had that chip on their shoulder. They knew they're a very good team. I mean, they're one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference, let alone the NHL. And in the postseason, the success just hasn't been there. So I think you're right. I think that's pretty spot on. They want this. They want this bad. And that's not to say the Islanders don't, because I think that Islanders want this just as bad. But when you look at the roster and you look at the talent level on the Tampa Bay Lightning, compared to the Islanders are playing right there. But again, there's those little mistakes that I was talking about. You're not going to get that by Tampa Bay. And now that they, the blood's there, they smell the blood, and they're so hungry to get to the cup final and win a cup. You've kind of sensed that extra oomph from them during the series.
Yeah, this is getting my my blood boiling now, because I've always been thinking about maybe these Maple Leafs are kind of like those Capitals or those previous Lightning, where it takes a while to get that experience, that knowledge that you got to battle more. You can't be like San Jose with Thornton and Marleau and other teams that have just let it dwell and never take it to the next level. So I can't wait in 2023 when Austin Matthews drills a guy from behind in the boards, gets suspended, and then comes back from his suspension and takes the Leafs all the way to win the cup in 2023. That'll be great.
That is extremely optimistic, and I would assume John Tavares is probably playing a huge part in that as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of stick it in the side of the Islander fans.
Yeah.
That'll listen, but I mean, yeah, it's interesting too, and not to take anything away from the Islanders, because I think if there's a franchise and there's a group of guys that want it equally as bad, I mean, that's the New York Islanders. Because you look at the roster, and I think that why you see such kind of this mentality of never giving up and continuing to push forward is because they've been an organization. I mean, the guys that have been there have been a group of guys that just been at times maligned by some in the press up north, and then of course by opposing fan bases, and then they've gone through a lot. They lost the captain to another organization. They were homeless and bouncing around arenas for so long. Now there's this stabilization and this deep run. So for guys like Josh Bailey, we tried to ask and get him to kind of just think back and look back at what this run means, and in typical Bailey fashion, he doesn't bite. But I mean, for a guy like Josh Bailey, that's got to be, I mean, to be in this position, I mean, has to be, a dream come true for him. I almost equate it to, you look back at those early 2000s teams for the New York Islanders in 2002, when you had guys like Kenny Janssen and Brad Isbister and those guys going to the playoffs for the first time really as Islanders. And the meaning behind that meant for them to do that with that organization is probably the same as it is for a guy like Josh Bailey, who bleeds orange and blue and has been here forever. And I mean, if there's a guy who deserves to be at this point in his career, I think it's Josh Bailey and some of those guys who just, have gone through a lot of crap to get to this point as Islanders.
Yeah, I remember going to Nassau and watching Okposo's first game, and man, that barn felt like home. It felt like I was in an OHL arena, but like everybody it seemed like everybody kind of knew Daryl and Sam, and it was homely, and it was a little more smaller and a little bit more older, but it had good feeling to it. And that's what I find in the NHL you don't feel when you go around the NHL arena or NBA stadiums. You don't feel the culture as much as why I do love to go see baseball games. You feel the culture in a baseball stadium, not as much in hockey arenas and baseball arenas, but you did feel it in Nassau for sure.
Yeah, and that's the biggest shame of all of this, I think, and I've kind of had this thought a couple times now during the postseason, is the fact that with everything going on in the world, these games are not being played at these home rinks. So the Islanders, who are making this run, they would have played every postseason game at the Nassau Coliseum. To have had an Eastern Conference Final game for the first time since 1993. By the way, I just turned 28 the other day, so this is the first time I've ever seen the Islanders in the Eastern Conference Final in my lifetime.
Okay.
So this is for Islander fans. I mean, this is a dream come true, especially for people around my age who've never seen this before. So the fact that they're not able to go watch these games in Nassau Coliseum, with the building just probably, I mean, the roof would have just been gone, by the fifth game at this point, because that building gets loud and it's so unique. And having covered a lot of different sports in my career, there really is not a lot that compares to seeing a playoff game at the Nassau Coliseum, because it really is such a unique experience. And I think, as someone from Toronto, the best example you can kind of get from that is the John Tavares game, his first return as a Maple Leaf, where, I mean, the building was full. The fans were the energy was insane. I mean, it was vicious and it was scary at times, but the creativity from the Islanders fan base after, the Islanders had that lead and things were pretty secure, about the chants and the atmosphere and everything, I think it was palpable to a lot of people who watched the game and maybe realized just what, the Islanders fan base has as far as the passion for that organization. So it is unfortunate that, they're not able to go watch these games in Nassau Coliseum, where, I can't even imagine what the atmosphere would have been like for, these couple games that would have been there. And, I mean, we had that Sunday game at 3:00, and I guaranteed, if that was a Nassau Coliseum game, the parking lot would have been filled by 11:00, with tailgaters and people just ready for the game and ready to see the playoffs at the Nassau Coliseum.
Mm-hmm. We weren't going to talk too much about this stuff, and I wanted to get more back to the series, but I guess, has there been any fans going to the arena at all? Because we've seen clips of them having mini parties or mini groups of people going to, like, Dallas to watch the game in the arena for the bubble game that's going on in Canada, right?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. The Islanders and really Nassau County kind of missed the mark, because the one thing about Long Island is especially these games are being played in the summer. It's August.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of beaches. There's a lot of space for people to do that. Specifically where I am, there's a county-owned area down a mile or two down the road where they were having drive-in movies. The fact they didn't do, like a drive-in, watch party for these games is a little unfortunate. But I think what you lost in that has been made up by some of these more unique ways that the fans have stayed in touch with each other. Places like Offside Tavern. If you go to NY Hockey Now, there's a story about that, where it's a big Islander bar. Unfortunately, it's closing because of the COVID pandemic, but it's one of those places where Islander fans have flocked to watch these games. The 329, the Orange and Blue Army, they've had little watch parties that they've organized on beaches across Long Island. So fans are doing it more so than the team. The team has had these little rallies and everything like that. And I think I will say, to their credit, they've done a good job of kind of going out and creating that little bit of atmosphere that they can in different places. They've done a great job actually in going to bars that are having the Islanders games on, that have a little bit of connection to the Islanders, and restaurants and different places, and giving them gear and allowing them to hand it out, and kind of making them part of the experience. So that's really where, the Islanders have done a great job in at least keeping the fan base engaged, because you have a place like, Blue Line Deli, for instance, which is up in a different part of Long Island, which has become basically like the official, the unofficial official deli of the Islanders, because the guy who owns it's such a huge fan. And you have people that go there on game day to go from across Long Island to go and support this place, and line up around the block and just talk hockey with their fellow fans, because it's their chance to interact before these games or after these games. So Long Island's definitely a bit of a different place, but
Yeah.
it's certainly been able to hold its own in the fact that they've remained connected with their team just in a little bit of different ways. I agree, though. It's a little unfortunate that the team hasn't at least been able to, or tried, or maybe they haven't. It just hasn't been successful considering some of the restrictions around here. But that it would have been nice to see something like that, because I have seen that, in some other cities around the NHL.
I still think I don't know if I'm Canadian enough, and I'm still irked a little bit about big groups. So I'm like, oh my God, is that really happening? Ooh,
right, yeah.
Whereas in Toronto, we have had, for the Raptors and the Leafs during their runs, drive-in theaters set up, and then families allowed to drive in and watch the game that way. And we've had, even reporters kind of come to the side corners and interview people while they're from a distance in their cars. So I kind of like that, and that was a good move by those organizations. Let's round it off and go back to the series. And one thing I did want to talk about was the Islanders' power play. Just it wasn't great maybe going into this series, but in this series specifically, when was the goal? Was it all the way back in game 1? Yeah. In the 4th minute? Oh my goodness, that was a long time ago.
Yeah, and that was, to talk about a long time ago, that was also Jordan Eberle, who's been as dry as sand during the postseason as well when it comes to goal scoring. So the power play has been another big storyline. If when you look back at these series and you look back at this series, it's going to be another big talking point for what did and didn't work for the Islanders. And at this point, it didn't work. The power play just can't get it together. And look, they've had chances too. That's the crazy thing. When they did have chances, Vasilevskiy just plays out of his mind. And then you have these other power play chances where the Islanders just they look so out of sync. Like bad entries, and then once they get the zone, they can't stay in the zone for long. Overthinking some of the aspects of the power play. One of the biggest problems the Islanders have, not just on the power play, but sometimes 5-on-5 as well, is shooting. Because they have a very good team of assist guys, right? They have a great group of guys who can see the play and have good on ice vision, and they can set things up. But as far as finishers go, that's a bit of a problem for the Islanders. It's been a bit of a problem for a long time. But I think it's kind of highlighted even more so this series because they just don't have the finisher there. They have a lot of guys who are trying to move the puck, set up the perfect play, pass it off, but no one's taking that shot. And one of the biggest things, you throw the puck to the net, especially on a man advantage, you go down and get a dirty area goal. You get the rebound goal, you get something down low, and you're putting yourself in a much better position than certainly circling the top of the point for 2 minutes, 5 minutes in certain games this series where they just haven't been able to capitalize. And that's such a death blow when, even if you limit the Tampa Bay Lightning's opportunities on the power play, you give them 2 chances, the percentage that they're going to score on at least one of them is pretty high. And they've done that in this series against the Islanders, where the Islanders kept their penalties low. They played disciplined hockey, but the one chance that they gave them, Tampa Bay finished. That's a huge difference maker. If you're losing a game, and like the 4-1 game the other day, it looks bad, but realistically, that was a 2-1 game really until until you get into close to the third period. So that's going to be one of the bigger storylines once we get out of this, is the fact that the Islanders power play just couldn't produce and struggled for the better part of the other series. But at least you were getting a goal when you had a couple there against Philadelphia. When you had a couple of power play chances against Washington, you were getting a goal. Yeah. Maybe if you got lucky, you got 2 goals, but at least they were putting the puck in the back of the net once on 5 chances. So that just hasn't been the case here, and that's a big difference maker.
Yeah. Before we go, I don't think a lot of people have talked about him, and I kind of want to do. He's looked steady on the back end, and that's Mayfield. Why? In my opinion, I've never seen him look as steady, and it just seems like I'm like, oh, really? He's actually pretty good.
Yeah, I think that the Islanders' defense, really, this has been their coming out party. I think if you watch the Islanders religiously, Ryan Pulock is extremely talented. Adam Pelech is such a huge part of their defense. And Scott Mayfield plays very well and is a solid defender in his own end. And I think that the more people watch the Islanders, the more they see that. And they go, oh, this isn't just a team that's lucky to be here. They do have some talent. Scott Mayfield's always been that way. He's really stepped up since he's become a big part of the Islanders' regular defensive core. I mean, I remember seeing Scott Mayfield when he was here during prospect camp. And I think one of the biggest takeaways then was the fact that he had such a hard shot. But as you saw him develop, his defensive game got better and better and better. And he's really risen to the occasion in certain points. You've seen him make a mistake in one game. I forget what it was. I think it was the Philadelphia game where he broke his stick in the overtime period, and that led to the game-winning goal. The next game, he goes out and he scores what essentially becomes the game winner. Scott Mayfield just knows how to step up in big situations and take the pressure and just run with it. One of his first games as an Islander during the playoffs was against the Capitals in 2015, and in the postseason in a Game 6 opportunity where if they lost, the season would have been over, and the Nassau Coliseum at that point, was getting ready to close. So he just managed to step up in big opportunities. He's always been a solid defender in his own zone. He's smart. He knows how to read the play well. And he has a tendency to really get his stick in some of those passing lanes and be able to break up some of those chances. So I think people are seeing that more and more now that the Islanders have been in the playoffs this long. And, if you're a hardcore hockey fan, you're watching every one of these games.
Yeah, for sure. Well, good luck tonight. I'll be entertained for sure. I would like to see the Isles keep it going. I want to see this go a little further. Again, you can find him on Twitter at C_Arnold01. Christian, thank you for coming on the show.
Anytime, man.
Let's go to Texas and talk some Clarence Campbell champions. Now we have on the show is Taylor Baird. She's the managing editor at Defending Big D. You can find her on Twitter at Taylor Baird. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. And are you excited? How excited are you?
I mean, we're pretty excited down here in Texas. The Stars haven't been to a Stanley Cup final in 20 years, which is quite a long amount of time. So, we're pretty stoked. I think, it's a different kind of year, different kind of season.
Mm-hmm.
We are not used to playoff hockey in August, September, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. And with the Cowboys season starting up, I mean, that's kind of been the focus of a lot of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But now that the Stars have made the final, they're finally getting a lot of recognition here in town, and I'm seeing a lot more green and a lot more stars, and people are talking about it. So it's exciting.
Yeah, there's no silver and blue star. There's a big green star. That's good. I remember now that you brought me back to 1999. I was actually a big number 56 fan. That is Sergei Zubov. And I know Eddie the Eagle also played after for the Maple Leafs. So it's good to see him play for the Blue over here. They won a big game versus the Golden Knights. But before we get into that, I don't know how many people did have Stars going all the way. I know
almost nobody.
Yeah, I know I didn't, and I know I told some of my friends, I'm like, pick Dallas, because a lot of people are not thinking Dallas, and they're doing well in my hockey pool. The people that picked Dallas.
Yeah, so I think, even myself, I'm happy to admit it. Realistically, I knew they would get past Calgary. I never thought that they would get past Colorado. And to be honest, I think if Colorado was fully healthy and with their number one goaltender, I think that series would have been even closer. I don't know if we would have seen as many 5-4 type games, to be honest. So I kind of figured they'd be done then, and then they weren't. And then I was like, there's no way they get past Vegas. They're healthy. They're deeper. They've got two great goaltenders. I mean, they're Dallas, but can score better consistently. And then they just flipped the script completely. And I definitely thought that yesterday in Game 5 that they would get absolutely crushed, and maybe it'd go 6 or 7, and then they did that. So, I don't know what to think about this team. I keep picking against them, and they keep winning. So.
Yeah, they're very unpredictable. I know when they started out, even in the bubble, they looked kind of rough in the round robin. So I was just like, okay, what's going on? And then they had that good physical battle versus the Flames. And then they did a solid job against the Avs, 7 games, and held up and did really well against that solid team in Vegas. In the last game, too, they were down 2-0, pretty much late in the third. And it just seems that this team always finds the right gear at the right time, as you said, to flip the script.
Yeah, so I think if you look at their entire year, if I had to use one word to describe the Dallas Stars 2019-2020 season, it would be resilient. They went into the season being kind of a dark horse favorite for the playoffs, as maybe a potential like Stanley Cup finalist. Maybe like if you wanted to, it was like, oh well, if you want to just put $5 on them, as the long shot, I would do that because I could see it happening. And then they started off the season going 1-7-1. They were awful. They scored 2 goals a game, and we were like, oh, here we go. We're about to watch the most boring hockey of our lives for the entirety of the season. They are not making the playoffs. I mean, we assumed that the firing of the coach would happen. Like, if they had not won Game 10, then I don't think Jim Montgomery even made it through October. And then after that, they went about a week of kind of winning some, losing some, and then they went down 3-0 against Minnesota in this game at the end of October. And all of a sudden, Alexander Radulov came out, and at the end of the second period, like 48 seconds left, he scored a goal, and it sparked a 6-goal comeback win by the Stars. And that kicked off a 14-1-1 stretch. They were the hottest team in November and jumped solidly back into the playoff contention and discussion of, oh, it's no longer are we making playoffs, but could we potentially actually win the division? There was a time where they were flirting with the lead, and then Montgomery gets fired randomly on this day in December. Comes out that it's, unprofessional conduct is what it was termed. Then like 3 weeks later, they're hosting the Winter Classic in Dallas in front of 85,000 people. Something that most people would have never thought would have been possible in Dallas. And then they did okay in January, and then they did pretty good in February, and then March hit, and they were like on an 0-4-2 skid heading into down the stretch, and then the league went on pause.
Yeah.
And so when you really look at the totality of everything, I mean, that's a lot for any team. The best teams find ways to kind of smooth out those ups and downs. So they're never really like, they don't generally lose a lot, but they don't necessarily win a lot. So they tend to kind of go more around the like 50-50 mark. And Dallas was like extreme highs and extreme lows. And who knew where this roller coaster was going to stop? And the playoffs have been pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, they've just been on a good high. So let's keep this going. Of course, another guy who's really been on a good high this playoffs is Gurianov. Again, he scores another big OT winner, and during this whole run, he's really found his game.
So what's funny about that is, and I don't think a lot of the casual hockey fans know, 2 years ago, Gurianov was a healthy scratch in the Calder Cup playoffs for the Texas Stars.
Yeah.
And now he's scoring big-time goals in the Stanley Cup playoffs and sending your team to the final. I mean, you can't make that up. You can't write that kind of story. It's amazing. And he's been really good all season long. So we knew as Stars fans and media like myself covering them all season, we knew it was within him. But I think the biggest thing about the Dallas Stars in the playoffs is it hasn't been just one guy having a playoff like that. This isn't like Nathan MacKinnon on the Colorado Avalanche where he's just astronomically higher and better than everyone else consistently. This is, you're getting a Joe Pavelski hat trick, and then you get a Denny Gurianov hat trick, and then you have Yoel Kiviranta, who I think didn't even play a game this season. I'm not even sure. Maybe he did at some point. But like a handful of games, and then all of a sudden he's in Game 7 against the Colorado Avalanche, and he's scoring a playoff hat trick to send his team on to the next round. I mean, and then Jamie Benn all of a sudden, and then Anton Khudobin. I mean, who would have ever thought a career backup would be this? I mean, just whoa! It's just so much, and it's like on any given night, it's one guy or one or two guys, and it doesn't have to be that same guy over and over again. And so it's like the depth is there, the belief is there. They've all bought in, and they're all playing for each other. And Rick Bowness, the interim head coach, before, like during the training camp, he told us, like, we're not going up there to win 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. We're going up there to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
Then they come out flat in the round robin, and we're like, right. You're getting swept in the first round. It's cool. And here we are. I mean, just they've figured it out, and they're able to do whatever they need to do to win on any given night.
For sure. And it's funny that you mentioned all those names, but you I think you missed a name, and his name is Tyler Seguin. How I guess you've already answered this question in terms of how far they've gone, while Tyler, you could say he's possibly their best player. He's an all-star, and he only has 2 goals. It's just amazing that everybody else around him have played well, but he is still doing it on the other sides of the ice other than scoring, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, there was a video that the Stars posted of a post-round celebration, and in it, you actually saw Tyler Seguin has his wrist wrapped. Not just like, some of the guys do where they wrap it as if they're going to fight. I mean, it looks like it's wrapped because he may be potentially injured, and it would jive with the way that you've seen him offensively. This playoffs. Like, it would not be surprising at all if he did some real damage to his wrist and he's just playing through it. But like you said, he's doing things on the other end of the ice. He's blocking shots. He's winning faceoffs. He's doing all of these other little things that are giving his teammates the time and the space to create and to score. And so, yeah, would you like to see more production out of him? Absolutely. Should you be concerned that he isn't scoring? Absolutely. Would it surprise me if at the end of the season they said, oh, Tyler Seguin is having wrist surgery and is going to be out for the next 6 to 8 weeks? Not at all. So, I mean, it's tough, especially now, because all we get is unfit to play as a designation. And I mean, during the playoffs, the hockey guys they're tight-lipped about what's going on anyway, and then all of a sudden you hear that a guy's been playing with his leg chopped off for like half of the round, once they're eliminated. So, I mean, I think that's the only realistic explanation, is that Seguin is actually really hurt. Just based on the way he's carrying himself and some of the things he's done, like he's shaking out his wrist after big shots and things. And so I don't want to say that that's a sure thing, but it wouldn't be surprising at all and would explain a lot, but we just won't know until the playoffs are over.
For sure. And all those names also that you mentioned, I don't know. I think there's one name that's beyond, above everybody else, and that's Miro Heiskanen. And we can talk all day about Miro and all day about John Klingberg, but I think we need to give some credit to my girl, Penny's brother.
Jamie likes that.
One of Canada's sweethearts, our big multi-gold medalist, her Penny Oleksiak. Her brother is Jamie, of course, the big guy, the beast. And I will say this: I know Oleksiak is a good, solid defenseman, but now in his second tour with the Dallas Stars, I did not see also him scoring 4 goals, including that beautiful breakaway deke backhand move he did. It wasn't the fastest, I will give him that, but it was pretty sweet.
That was by far one of the strangest goals I think I've ever seen, just based on who it was and contextually what happened. Oleksiak is playing with a lot of confidence. When he was on his first tour in Dallas, it seemed that he struggled to live up to the expectation of a first round pick. And his confidence and several coaching changes and system changes and all this other stuff just had kind of jacked with him, I think, mentally. Mm-hmm. And so when they traded him to Pittsburgh, he found a consistent system and coaching staff that, essentially said, you're our third pair D, like, do that. And he was able to kind of almost reset himself. And so when he came back to Dallas in a trade, which I thought was pretty funny that they traded for a guy that they traded away.
Yeah.
He came back without that same expectation, because then everybody looked at it and they said, well, he was a solid third pairing D in Pittsburgh, so that's what he is. And so the expectation level had been reset. And now all of a sudden, like you said, he was out here scoring goals. And I mean, he scored the tying goal in the middle in a third period. I believe it was against Calgary with like seconds left in the game. And like, he would not be the one that you would anticipate would be doing that, but here we are. And also the one thing I will say, I think he only looks slower than he actually is. Because he has such long legs, I think his stride is very long, and so he doesn't have to take a lot of steps to like eat up distance.
Yeah.
So I think he's kind of deceptively a better skater than maybe on the surface level it looks like.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've kind of always said about Oleksiak.
Yeah.
Because I've never said anything bad about him at all.
Yeah, that's what they used to say about my boy Nick Anchprov, and of course they said that quite often for the great 66 Mario Lemieux, looking maybe as fast just because he was a bigger guy. How do you think going into the finals they could look against either of Tampa or New York Islanders?
I mean, honestly, they're going to look like Dallas Stars hockey.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's gotten them here. They haven't changed how they play based on the opponent.
Yeah, have they? It's been unpredictable almost every series.
I don't think so. And I say that because they've always been a defensive-oriented team, and they've always been opportunistic. And I think the reason why they looked so high scoring in the Colorado series was because backup goaltender, then you played your third goaltender, Michael Hutchinson. So like, he's got to pass. And I think that the reason why they were able to score so much was because they were given a lot of opportunities by Colorado to be that way and to score off of those chances. I mean, they had a ton of opportunities off the rush or with some odd man looks, and Colorado wasn't getting the saves. Vegas was a very good matchup for Dallas because they play a similar kind of style, a little bit heavier and a little bit more structured, I would say. And I think the fact that it was such a low scoring series just goes to prove like how evenly matched those two teams really are in terms of style. And they both were getting excellent goaltending. I mean, Lehner and Fleury were both amazing, and Khudobin was just slightly better. And and then at the end of the day too, Dallas had those moments in each game where they bent but did not break. And then they kind of allowed the team, they allowed Vegas to wear themselves out in the first period, give us everything you got. And then now we're going to enforce our will on the game, and we're going to start turning the tide. And I think that's what you saw in game 5 was Vegas was giving it everything they got, and Kedovan let in one. Then they let in that second one to start the period.
Mm-hmm.
And Bowness said in the post game that there was no panic on the Stars bench because they just believe that, and they've done it so many times at this point. 2-goal leads don't matter to them. They're just like, all right, we'll just get the next one, and then we'll just go from there. And they can do that. So they've kind of put that weapon in their arsenal as well, but it all stems from being that sound defensively first. Yes, they got outshot. Yes, they got outchanced by Vegas, but in the areas that matter the most, the high danger areas, it was an almost even series.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were not giving Vegas the middle of the ice to do anything with. And that's what Dallas does too.
Yeah.
Against the Islanders, I think it would probably look a lot like this Vegas series, if I'm being honest. And then against Tampa, I mean, I think you might end up seeing something that resembles a little bit more like the Colorado series, just with better goaltending on both sides.
Yeah.
So
we'll see.
I mean, they can play with anybody, it seems like, in this postseason. And I don't know, there's just something about this team that you start to kind of think after all that they've been through and everybody writing them off every round and every time we turn around, it's, oh, well, yeah, but Colorado would have beat them if they had been healthy. Well, maybe, but also maybe not. Like,
Yeah.
Dallas still did a lot of good things on their own. And so you start to kind of think that maybe, just maybe, this is a team of destiny, that they're just destined to hoist it again.
Maybe they are the team of destiny. We'll find out next round. Again, you can find her on Twitter at Taylor Baird. Thanks for coming on the show, Taylor.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's recap that Vegas run that they had. Now with us is Justin Emerson. He's a Vegas Golden Knights hockey reporter for the Las Vegas Sun and Las Vegas Weekly. You can find him on Twitter at J15Emerson. Justin, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Peter. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, maybe not so great for the Golden Knights. And before we get into the run that they've had, which was really good, that was another tough exit to take last night, eh?
Yeah, 2 years in a row now. They've had a pretty heartbreaking exit from the playoffs. Last year it was the famous was it a major, was it not a major call against San Jose, and this year another lost multiple goal lead in the third period and then an overtime loss. A little bit less controversy this time around, but that definitely means it doesn't hurt as much for Golden Knights fans. It was tough. I mean, they were up 2-0 with 10 minutes left in the third. You kind of figure you're going to win that game, and to let that one slip away, I think that one's going to hurt for a little bit.
Yeah, I think they're still irked a little bit about those penalties, especially the first one they scored on. Again, late in the third, they're leading. I was a little surprised, and I was surprised overall. I actually had Vegas as my pick to win it all this year, and I've picked it even before the playoffs started. I had a good feeling for them, but wow, Dallas is a little unpredictable. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say I had them going far too. I had them coming out of the West. I'm surprised that they weren't able to get through Dallas, and I think they might have run into some issues if they had hit Tampa in the final. But I think every team in the league is gonna run into some issues if you hit Tampa.
Yeah.
But no, I thought definitely came up a little bit short of expectations. I think a lot of people, just like you, were expecting them to at least make, if not win, the Stanley Cup final this year. So to see an exit in the conference final, and especially in just 5 games, is a little surprising.
Yes, I know the penalty on Whitecloud, some people weren't too thrilled about it. Gurianov scores the winner in OT. The expression on Zach's face kind of says it all. And even DeBoer, I think it was after the game, he said that it was such a shitty penalty to begin with. For that type of penalty to decide a game is not right for me. He played his ass off, he said about Whitecloud.
Yeah, I mean, it's cut and dry. I mean, he hit the puck over the glass without it touching it, and by rule, that's a penalty. It's a delay game. There's no controversy there. That's what happens, and Whitecloud wasn't disputing, and neither was DeBoer that he should have been in the box. Now, whether or not that should be a penalty to begin with, I've kind of been on that train for a couple of years. I hate this penalty.
Yeah.
It's terrible. It's always an accident. I don't think that if it became anything else, players would start firing it over the glass on purpose. I think I hate that it's a rule, but I mean, it is a rule, and the Golden Knights penalty kill have been so good all series, all postseason, and yet, when they needed it most, it was the last two penalties.
I do want to add this point. What about the first penalty that resulted in the first goal against Vegas for Dallas there?
Yeah, that was the Tuck tripping call, right?
I
mean, stick goes under the blade. I mean, it's tough to take that penalty with leading in the game with 5 minutes left or whatever it was. But I mean, again, it's like I don't think there's any controversy that those should or should not have been called penalties. Whether or not the penalty kill should have stepped up when they needed to the most, that's another story. But I mean, they were definitely penalties in my mind. I don't think there's any debate there.
One thing I do want to mention was the Twitter account for Vegas Golden Knights. They put pain. Period. I don't know how much pain. Like, again, I even tweeted a poll, and people can go see it on Jablam Sports Twitter account. What is worse? Because of last year's loss was difficult to take, and in my opinion, yes, I'm an angry and thirsty Leafs fan for so many years, and it's over 50 years now. But I still think the Vegas loss last year was worse than the Leafs 4-1 loss versus the Bruins in that Game 7.
Oh wow, yeah.
I think so. I think so. For my opinion, taking a step back, not being like a huge hardcore Leafs fan, taking a step back, I think it's the Vegas one is worse in terms of that major.
I would think so. I mean, they were both what, three goal leads in the third period that disappeared. But I mean, the difference is for Vegas, it felt like, I mean, the Sharks scored 4 on that power play that Vegas felt should have been a minor, if anything. So I think there is that kind of controversy as to, well, we shouldn't have even been in this situation. It was a bad call. So yeah, I would probably say that one's a little worse because it's also always easier to blame referees than it is to look inward sometimes.
Exactly. It always is. All right. Talking about Vegas in this series in particular, it looked like they were struggling to score, and I guess you could take it all the way back to the Canucks series and their good goaltender in Demko the last few games. They really struggled to score, and they just hit a wall throughout this series, and of course the last two versus the Canucks.
Well, even in the Chicago series, like the goal totals were there, but it always felt like they maybe should have had a little bit more. Like, they won that series in 5 games, and the reason they didn't win in 4, Corey Crawford played really well in Game 4 to kind of steal Game 4 for Chicago. But it always felt like there was another year that the Golden Knights just didn't hit, and then it kind of got exposed a little bit, and it almost cost him against Vancouver. You mentioned Demko coming in, and he was spectacular. 5, 6, and 7, stole 5 and 6 for Vancouver, and almost stole 7 for him. And then once the Golden Knights got to Dallas, they ran into not only a good goalie, but also a good defensive system. And that's something that Chicago and Vancouver didn't have as much. The Golden Knights were just dominating possession and controlling it. And they did to some extent against Dallas too, but not to the degree that they did against their other 2 opponents. So the Golden Knights ran into a really good opponent. Obviously, taking nothing away from Dallas, they've gotten where they are. They beat some good teams on the way here. But the Golden Knights sticks went cold at the precisely wrong time.
Yeah. And I even think it's a little weird to say, but Mark Stone was kind of flying out there, but not so much as well. It was there.
Yeah, Stone, I think he had 2 points in Game 3, but was off the score sheet in every other game.
Yeah.
Riley Smith scored in Game 5, but he hadn't scored since Game 1 of the Vancouver series. Jonathan Marchessault went 11 games without a goal. Max Pacioretty, I think he went 8 games without a goal. Alex Tuch was so good in the Vancouver series, he didn't score in the Dallas series. So, yeah, it was definitely a problem that the Golden Knights' top forwards just weren't getting the job done, and so often the offense was running through Shea Theodore, which great for Theodore. He had a breakout postseason by anybody's measure, but he needed a little bit more support.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Theodore, of course. He really blossomed this season, and in the playoffs, I've been cheering for him since he was with the Ducks. It made me a little upset. I couldn't get a Theodore jersey when I was in Vegas earlier this year. The price is there. It's a little hard for a guy that lives in Canada, and it's a little easier to get jerseys at a little bit cheaper as well, maybe. I think that's just how it is, I guess, for Canadians here. But in my opinion, he would have easily been my pick to win the Conn Smythe had they have gone to the finals.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was let's rewind it and just say that the Golden Knights beat Dallas, and let's say that they beat Tampa or New York and win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
It would have been Shea Theodore or Robin Lehner. I think those were the really two options. I mean, Lehner had so many shutouts. He had 4 shutouts in the postseason. He was spectacular. But I think that the way Shea Theodore really blossomed from a kind of a good player and a budding star into a genuine star this postseason. I mean, my vote for Conn Smythe definitely would have gone to Theodore unless he fell apart in the final or something like that. But yeah, he was the Golden Knights' most valuable player through their 20 postseason games. No question about it.
You mentioned Robin Lehner. What will happen now?
Oh, the fun stuff now. The fun talk.
Yeah. So there were rumors that they might have. Of course, we already know about the whole Fleury and the agent thing. But there were rumors swirling that, and some people said they announced it almost, but it obviously doesn't seem like it's been announced, that they have locked up Robin Lehner. And they kind of asked him before the previous game, right, about the contract, and he said there's no way that that's happened, and he's focused on the games right now. Where are they now with this whole situation? Are they going to lock up Lehner? Are they going to keep Fleury? Are they going to have to deal with this kind of scenario for a whole season or 3 seasons?
I can't imagine if Lehner does end up signing an extension with the Golden Knights that Fleury will be on the team next year. If it is, the report is 5-year, $5 million a year, and Fleury's got $7 million on his cap for the next 2 seasons. That's $12 million for the goaltending position, and there's other needs that need to be addressed. The Golden Knights have about that much, about $5 million in cap space. If you use that all on Lehner, you're running short on forwards, on some defensive depth. So you're definitely going to need to do that. And that's the question, right? Is what do you do with Fleury? Golden Knights can either trade him, they can buy him out, which just, it seems preposterous if you would have told me a year ago that this is where the Golden Knights are at. But here we are. We're looking at the face of the franchise, the goalie that took him to the Stanley Cup final, maybe being on the outs. Who knows? Maybe by the time this podcast comes out, I doubt it. It'll probably be within the next couple of weeks. But it fell apart quickly between the Golden Knights and Fleury for sure.
All right, you can find him on Twitter at J15Emerson. Justin, thank you for coming on the show.
Absolutely, anytime.
I want to thank all our guests today, Justin, Taylor, Christian, and Eric. They're all great at covering their hockey teams. Remember, go to jablamsports.com, see all our podcasts and game notes for every episode. And for all our guests, you'll get links to them and info about them and where you can reach them. And of course, other links maybe for things we talked about in this show. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. And click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends. If you want to contact us again, remember, if you have any questions or ideas for the show, or if you want to vote on the poll that we usually have every week, you can follow me on Twitter at Russian98 or the entire team at Jablam Sports. You can also use the hashtag Jablam Sports, that's JABLAM Sports. Or you can go to our contact page on our website, jablamsports.com/contact. Also, if you do like wrestling, we have our new wrestling podcast, Pro Wrestling Explode, presented by Jablam Sports. It's where Pepperoni, Miranda get into AEW and WWE, and they recap, analyze recent matches, storylines, and pay-per-views. Thank you, everyone. Stay tuned next week as the finals will just be beginning, and we'll predict who's going to win that one. And, of course, I might go Stars this time and how they're going with great guests. Again, stay tuned for that next Wednesday. Shout out, this week's shout out is to Balkar Jagpal. He's a great friend of mine. He reminds me of my dad in many ways. I look up to him, and he always gives me sage advice. I know sometimes it's harsh what he has to say to me, but I know he's trying to push me to work harder for what I want, and he has my best needs in mind. Thanks, Balky. And to every one of our followers and listeners, I'm giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy. Listen, be yourself, and stay strong.